Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. Now, I am rather excited about this one. I'm excited about all of them, but particularly this one because Cathy Smith was the host for one of my first podcast experiences. So I've got a big thank you shape. For those of you listening, that's a heart shape. I've just drawn a heart shape in the air for this lovely lady. She helped me to get on the road to podcasting. So thank you very much, Cathy. And with that, I'm going to explore with her how she has done the page to stage transition. Some of my guests have started on the stage and then gone to the page and vice versa. So I'm going to ask you, Cathy, what brought you to where you are now, both author and speaker?
Thank you. And you're very welcome to be part of my podcast. And you've actually been part of my podcast twice.
I know.
That's very exciting. So I have multiple episodes well into the 200s. So a lot of hard work, as you would know.
Yeah.
So I was actually technically a speaker before a writer. Although I have been writing blog posts and articles and things like that for a very long time, but never as some of them have been published, but not as a book author per se. So yes, definitely the speaking came before the writing.
Okay. That's the thing, isn't it? Because we all have our own definitions of being an author. One of the ladies I was interviewing over the weekend, she said, well, we want to get back to basics. I wrote a play when I was 9. Okay, that would work. That would work. She said, because actually that has been taken on stage, because she or no, not that one, but she has done other screenplays. She did a screenplay course, and one of those has been taken onto the stage. So she got to actually see her play on stage, literally taking the words from page to stage. Very exciting. So yeah, this is the point, isn't it? Being an author, being a published author, can come in various different stages. I mean, you were talking about having a blog. Blogs are published. They may be a digital form, but they're still published.
Yeah. And way back when, if you want to look at it that way, I used to have a newsletter that was printed and sent out. So I guess it's an intertwining, isn't it? We go from writing to stage to writing to back and
that's
forth.
The other thing, the definition of stage, because most people, when you talk about public speaking, they think of I can't do that, on stage, rah, 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 Tony Robbins style. And I go, I wouldn't want to do that either. And he's got that bit, leave him to it. But we're now looking at stages that cover different genres. I mean, you and I are both podcast hosts. There you go. That's one. That's a stage. There are the virtual stages that COVID, thank you, has opened up to so many of us now, which we wouldn't have thought about before.
No.
And then obviously we've got the live in-person stages, and those come in various sizes and shapes as well.
Absolutely.
Because you're a chapter leader for a networking group, aren't you?
Yes, and I have been for a very long time, multiple networking groups along the way. But yeah, I've spoken in front of 1 or 2 people, and I've actually spoken in front of a couple of 100 people. So just medium-sized stages, but yeah, and sometimes it's just a stage of 1, and that's just as important as well.
Exactly. It's about the impact that you have, the connection you have with your audience, isn't it? As you said, whether it's one or lots of ones.
Yes. And I think that's really important these days, because we are so connected to our devices that we can be in a room of a lot of people making absolutely no connection at all. Sometimes we can be in front of one person, giving them the time of day, which might be the first time they've had the time of day all day, because we're just so connected to doing multiple things instead of actually talking to people.
So true. I'm on my travels, and you walk into any public area, whether it be a shopping mall, a bus station, train station, actually on the trains, restaurants even, everybody is on the phone.
Yep.
And eye contact
Doesn't exist. They're
I
actually
think-
saying that's a development problem with children now, because
Really?
even their mums, when they're breastfeeding, if they're still breastfeeding, are not making eye contact with their children and not actually getting that touch and personal attention
Yeah.
that whole breastfeeding and the mother contact is all about, because they're on their phones while they're doing it. And it's becoming a learning difficulty because the children are not getting that immediate stimulation right from word go.
Yes, the social interaction. In fact, there will be that sort of failure to thrive issue. I don't know if
Indeed.
you're familiar with the monkey experiment from years ago, where they actually took baby monkeys and put them onto sticks with something soft to cuddle up to in lieu of mum. And all the ones that did that, they all failed to thrive, and it ultimately died because they didn't have that maternal contact. So
Yeah.
it wasn't just a case of the softness, it was the heartbeat, it was the interaction.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's scary stuff.
Indeed.
Stuff. Moving on. For you then, the speaking and the writing came pretty much hand in hand, didn't they?
Yeah, it did. I've been doing a lot of speaking, and my first speaking was a dismal failure because I wanted to tell everybody everything. I didn't want to miss anything.
Mm-hmm.
So for the people watching our video, I'm putting my hands right across in front of my face, because that's what I did with my piece of paper. I had it really big so I could read it easily. And I literally read it. I wanted to get you all the dot points. I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss any important things. And of course, it was awful. And I did not get a rounding applause for that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where sometimes we get stuck. We get so stuck in our own head about how we want to put our message across that we forget about the audience. So these days, I don't have notes at all on most of my talks. And it's a case of knowing your subject and having the confidence to get up and speak. And yes, sometimes there was a point or two that I wanted to tell you that I missed, but I might have given you some other key bits of wisdom depending on what the audience was doing. So I think it does come with practice.
You're feeding off your audience then, aren't you?
Absolutely.
If you mention something that does not get a reaction, or not the reaction you were expecting, then you can go, okay, switch gears, change into something else. Yeah, absolutely. And that again goes back to your point about knowing your audience.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Oof, absolutely. One of the things that I find a lot of particularly business people in a similar situation, you mentioned that you wanted to get everything out. If there's that sense of insecurity, I've got to prove my worth here, you want to be able to show how much you do know. And it can be like drinking from a fire hose. None of it's going to stick.
No.
So as you say, you pick 1, 2, maximum 3 things to mention, and you share that with a bit more depth and a bit more feeling.
Indeed. And I think that's where course creators also go wrong.
Yes.
Is that because you're paying money for their course, they think that they have to put absolutely everything into it. And then it becomes so overwhelming that people never finish it. So quite often, less is far more powerful.
Yeah. There's a phrase I use, which is quality over volume.
Oh, nice. Like that.
Because as you say, you choose the ones that is going to be most impactful for that particular audience. And yeah, if you know your material, you can work your way around it quite easily, but you do need the confidence to know your material, and that requires practice.
It does. It does. And it requires practice in lots of different settings. So you start out by practicing in front of the mirror or in a vacant room, and then you might maybe record it so that you can see how the audience is going to perceive you. And these days with Zoom and all the other technology we have, that's really easy. You can do it off your phone or you can do it off your laptop. absolutely easy. And then you might get a few friendlies and get some people to come in and have a chat with you and put it to them. And then start with little ones. And lots of the service clubs always like to have people as guest speakers. So they're always a nice way to start and get a little bit of audience reaction before you do go on to that bigger stage.
Yes. Thank you for that. Absolutely. Because we were saying about the people that are primarily listening to this podcast are authors who have poured their heart and soul into either a solo book or a chapter, multi-author anthology.
Yep.
And particularly they're nonfiction. So they're putting in their reason for why they're doing what they're doing. And it's part to support the business. And I don't know how you felt. You've been at this for a while, but certainly the people that I've been talking to, they've put so much effort into it. And often the origin story has been traumatic. It's what's brought them to the stage of going, I don't want anybody else to go through this.
Yeah.
And having got that down on paper, they've then gone, oh, you want me to talk about it out loud? That I can hear my own words out loud? Yeah. And that can be another big step. Again, going back to the definition of a stage. So if you've got that option of a one-on-one conversation, you know what we're doing now, then actually it's not that bad. We can have a chat about it. I don't need a presentation. I don't need PowerPoints. I don't need to remember my lines. It's a conversation.
Absolutely.
And that, as you know, is such an easy step up if people are really reluctant to carry on. So, yeah.
And sometimes it's about the way you tell your story as well. Yes, It's been traumatic and there's been some things gone on. But what are those things that maybe empowered you? What are those things that maybe made you stronger, made you the person you are today, and made you make sure that nobody else is going to be this, rather than that telling it as a victim? Sometimes telling it as a victim is where we get really caught up in it. And it can be that gut-wrenching, oh, no, I can't talk about this anymore. So sometimes it's just about a reframe of how you're actually telling your story too.
Exactly. I mean, when I'm very keen on what I consider my duty of care when working with speakers who are telling those fairly traumatic experiences, that it's said in such a way that they, as I call it, speak from their scars, not their wounds. They don't go back into that deep expression of the emotion. You can tap into it because every time you've got a scar, you've got a reminder there of what you did go through. And you can remember and share the scene without feeling the depth of it for yourself, which in and of itself is re-traumatizing. And depending on what you're saying, you're traumatizing the audience.
Indeed.
Which is not what was your intention.
No. And you don't want to be reliving those events day after day after day. So sometimes if you haven't dealt with that emotion, it can be too soon to be out there, particularly speaking about it.
Yeah, exactly. So again, that's why when I'm working with speakers, we've done a lot of the deeper work, the internal script stuff.
Yes.
Let's make sure that and how we language it is very, very important for me. I think we had this discussion about the 3-chair exercise before, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for the audience who weren't party to our previous conversation, but there, when you tell your story, you can tell it from your position. If there were other people involved, you can literally move chairs and tell it from their position, and then move chairs again and tell it from the observer's position. What did it feel like? What did it look like to somebody looking on? And that's where you can get to, I understand the emotions, I can describe them, but I'm not living there anymore. So that's a very powerful way that I work with the speakers in that respect. So the audience then may be reluctant to share those stories for that very reason. So you, as a podcaster, you're your guests are in the business space, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Can you tell us more about that?
So my podcast is called Small Business Talk for Coaches, and it's about empowering coaches to be able to get out there and market themselves, because majority of coaches are taught to coach. They're not taught the business of coaching.
Yes.
And that is two completely separate things.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that they learn to coach, they build their skills, they get their confidence, and then they go looking for clients. And nothing. There's dead air. There's absolutely nothing. And then they think, well, oh, I must be doing this wrong. I'm not a good coach. But it's not that at all. It's just quite often, if they've come from corporate, they haven't learnt the skills of marketing. They haven't learnt the skills of sales. They haven't learnt the skills of running a business because somebody else has done that for them in the past.
Yes, yes. It wasn't my department.
No. So it's a case of helping them to, one, identify the fact that they're different skills, and then what are those skills that they need and how can they then market themselves so that they can actually get a sale. And then quite often what happens is they go out and they do all this marketing, and that's great, and they're talking to people and they're getting leads, but oh, I've got to ask people for money. Well, if you'd like it to be a business, yes, you do, because otherwise it's just an expensive hobby. Yeah. So that's what my podcast is all about.
Beautiful, beautiful. So it's the nitty-gritty stuff, isn't it?
Yes, and it can be anything from just that mindset of how am I actually going to ask somebody to pay me? And sometimes it is that value proposition. Am I good enough to do this? I've only just learnt my coaching. But quite often those people have years and years of experience. They just don't realise that it can translate and come across into their coaching, particularly if they're coaching in an area where they used to maybe be a consultant or they've had all those years of experience.
Yeah, because the thing is, and again, that's where from a speaking perspective, you talk to anyone and go, you do realise that you've been persuading, you've actually been selling all your life, because every time you open your mouth, you're making an impact on somebody and you were inviting them to buy into what you're saying.
Yeah. And right from when you were a child and you were trying to get that lolly or that ice cream from your parents or your sibling or your mate, it's all persuasion.
Yeah. And when you frame it, we're both coaches, when you do the old reframe and you point it out, you've been selling all your life.
Yep.
Oh, that's sales.
Yeah.
It's back to the definitions again, isn't it?
It is. And marketing is just getting out there, letting people know that you can solve their problem. And sales is just giving them a solution to that problem.
Because you've got that. You know what, you know where they're at, you know where they've been. Sorry, you know where they are, you know where they want to be.
Yes.
And you can fill in the gap.
And that's the art of marketing, is actually being able to get that language so that your ideal customer, the one that you want to work with, and I do say one, and I'll come back to that in a second, the one that you want to work with, they can actually understand you and they can go, oh, yes, they are talking my language. Tick. Yep. That's what I want. Ever been and seen an ad on something on the old days? It used to be in radio and TV, and now it's social media, and you go, they must be looking over my shoulder. They're getting me. I've just been talking about that. And that's where you need to get to that languaging. And the reason I say one is we all want to help everybody generally in the coaching industry. Quite often coaches are people that have big hearts and we want to help everybody. But if we start by trying to do that, we'll help nobody, because nobody will actually understand what we're doing. And even when you think of people like Facebook, the really big ones, they didn't start by helping everybody. They started in one dorm room, in one university in America. And then once they'd got their mates to buy in, then they went to the whole dorm. Then they went to the whole campus. Then they went to a couple of campuses. And then they went world domination. They didn't go from idea to world domination in one step.
Exactly. And you were saying about the knowing the language of your ideal audience. One situation I regularly remind myself of, and clients that I'm talking to, when they say, oh, I speak to everyone. I'm like, well, let me share with you. One of the guys I was working with to start with, he was fresh out of coaching school and he wants to be a career coach. So I said, who are you wanting to work with? Oh, anyone from school age up to retiring. I said, oh, okay. Tell me, would you use the same language with your mates as you would with your granny? No, would you? Yep, point taken, he said.
Absolutely. And it can be exactly that. People say, oh, I want to work with a 10-year age gap. Well, if you're working with a 15-year-old and a 25-year-old, that 10-year age gap is massive. If you're working with a 50-year-old and a 60-year-old, then maybe it's not quite so big. But you just need to think about who your audience are and what the demographics is, because a 35-year-old is going to be looking at different platforms, different profiles, different ways of getting their information than a 60-year-old. And a 60-year-old in the city is probably going to be looking at it quite different from a 60-year-old in the country. Yes. A 60-year-old that has very good internet as opposed to a 60-year-old that doesn't. A 60-year-old that has English as their first language or as their fourth language, etc., etc.
Yes, indeed. So you're right, there's the demographics, and also you slipped in there what we all call the psychographics as well.
That's it.
What makes them tick?
Indeed.
Are they silver surfers, or are they, you what? Internet? Help. How do I turn this machine on?
Yep.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was blessed with my mother. When we were going through, when computers started off, the British government had the idea of putting a BBC computer in every primary school.
Ah.
So my mother had a BBC computer. Now we are talking about
1 or 2 years ago.
Just a few years ago, yes. So we were the 80s, when you had to put the tape, remember the old
dot
in a tape player and press play, and it used to into the machine, and one tape would be about 15 minutes worth of programming. But it was enough that my mother thought, okay, well, this computer thing, I can handle this. So down the track, when she retired, they got a PC, which was great because I was away at this point, and it meant that we could Skype.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is important, isn't it, to understand where your ideal person is coming from and what they want to go to.
Exactly. And that's where people get it wrong, because they think that they'll get particularly onto social media on what they like. But is your ideal audience there? And are you prepared to do what you need to do to get onto that social media? I had a client that really loved Instagram, absolutely adored it, spent a lot of her time on there. Her clients were on there. Perfect. Tick, tick. So I said, okay, we need some content. We organised a professional photographer. Oh, no, I'm not doing photos. Okay, we're talking Instagram. All right, maybe we'll do some videos. Can we do some behind the scenes or some candid shots or something? Oh, no, I'm not doing that either. So I kind of said, what do you like about Instagram? She said, all the photos and videos. I said, okay, so you don't want to do photos and you don't want to do videos. What kind of content do you think we're going to put onto Instagram? And she just stood there and looked at me and went, oh, okay. So if you're not going to be consistent on that platform, then your clients, your potential clients, your ideal audience is not going to be able to make a connection with you. If they can't make the connection, they can't start a relationship with you. And we're not talking romantic, we're talking business. And they can't start that relationship with you. And if they can't get the connection and they don't have a relationship with you, they're not going to buy from you.
Well, we all know that it's not what we're buying really, it's who.
Yeah.
And there again, audience, they need to be able to hear you speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your book. On that front, you've got a book just out.
I do. It is called The Coach's Marketing Roadmap. And for those looking on the screen, I am holding it up. It is a beautiful book with a picture of me on the back. And it is a step-by-step for coaches to learn the business of coaching. So it's very simplified. So it's very easy to read. It's a quick read. So it's chapter by chapter with a few things that you can do at the end of each chapter, and then a little story to bring it all together, because we do love to learn with stories.
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh. Can you share a little story? I'm putting you on the spot on this one.
That is okay.
You weren't prepared for this.
One of my favorite stories is the girl that is at a lake with her grandfather. And she's a youngish girl, so let's call her Lucy. Let's say Lucy's about 7. So she's hanging out at the lake with Granddad, and she's been playing and she's a bit thirsty. So she goes over to Granddad and says, "Can I have a drink, please, Granddad?" He says, "Yes, I've got this beautiful lemon cordial for you." So he pours it into a glass, but there's no water in it. It's just concentrated cordial. And she says, "Oh, this is a bit sweet. Mummy normally puts water in it." He says, "Oh, just pop down to the lake, tip it into the lake, scoop it back up, and you'll have a beautiful glass of cordial." And she thinks, fantastic. I'm going to have all this cordial. So Lucy trots off down to the lake, tips her cordial into the lake, scoops it back up again, takes a big mouthful. Oh, it's sour. It's awful. I don't even know if I got 1 drop of cordial in it. So she goes back to Granddad and she says, "Granddad, that's not how Mummy does it. That's not how it works. Can I please have some more?" Granddad says, "Yeah, sure, no worries." He tips the same amount of concentrate into the cup again. She says, "This time, Granddad, do you reckon you could tip a bit of the water out of your drink bottle into my cordial?" Which she does. Mixes perfect. She has a tiny little sip this time because she's a bit worried about what Granddad might have done. Oh, it's divine. It is just the right consistency. It is beautiful. And then she goes on to take a bigger gulp. So Granddad says, "What do you think the difference is?" She says, "In my cup, it's concentrated. It's just perfect. It just fits me perfectly." So the moral of the story is quite often we want to spread our message out as far and wide as we can, but it gets so diluted that nobody actually gets to taste it. Or if they do, it's a bit sour because it doesn't quite hit the mark. But if we're more concentrated and we only talk to 1 or 2 or 5 people to start with, our ideal people, then our message gets across fine. And once we've talked to 1 or 2, then we can amplify that message out and then grow the message. So that's probably my favourite story.
Gorgeous. Thank you. And as you say, you get so much more across when you tell it in story form.
Indeed.
Because we both know that story gets in under the subconscious radar, because the conscious mind goes, no, come on, you got to get as many people as possible. Funnels, there are lots of people at the top and a few people at the bottom. But the subconscious mind is going, yeah, but you're not tasting it, are you?
No, you are not. And story is how we've communicated for hundreds of thousands of years. We did stories before we learnt to write. So exactly. I guess that meant we were on the stage before writing.
Exactly.
So is that the chicken or the egg?
Yeah. I mean, even now, you stick a load of people around a campfire, and I can guarantee you within 5 minutes, somebody will be telling a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's part of our makeup to tell stories.
And we remember stories too.
Yes.
So if I had have read you multiple pages of the book, giving you the same information about niching, basically, you'd be going, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting, whatever. But by telling you a story, I bet that you're more likely to remember it. And quite often when we hear stories, we remember where we were. We remember that we were listening to it on Wendy's podcast. We remember maybe we're driving the car. Stories help to ignite the emotion, an emotion cell.
And the emotions bed in the memory in the first place, because you got more connections into your limbic system. And we can get to the neuroscience of that, but we exactly. So I mean, the whole story thing is really powerful. And when you get into that under the radar, if you will, and get those messages in, it really does stick.
It does. And sometimes it can be a very short story. It can even be like 1 or 2 lines. Sometimes it can be a longer story. I guess the thing to be careful of is that it's not too long, so it loses your audience. It needs to continue to engage. I mean, that's what TV does so well, doesn't it? It gives you those shorter episodes so that we're hanging on our seat waiting for the next one. We're binge watching it, and now they're spreading them out again, so we can't binge watch it. So that gets us in because we have that little cliffhanger at the end. And are they going to get married? Is the villain going to be the victor? What's going to happen? Oh, we've got to wait till next week or next episode.
Yes, and that's really exciting, isn't it? So the teaser thing. Again, if you think back to some of the movie trailers, go back to the original Star Wars. That's grossed phenomenal amount of money, but if the trailer to advertise it in the first place bombed, we wouldn't be in that position of everybody knowing that opening scene. Once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away.
Indeed. And many, many, many ones have bombed. And sometimes it's been the trailer that's been the crux of the movie. And you've gone, I could have saved 2.5 hours of my time by not having to watch the rest of it. Or if they haven't been edited correctly, a lot longer. So, yes, editing is always a good thing.
And that's the thing with you were saying about the sense of remembering where you were when you had the experience of the story. There's also, because most of the time we are told stories when we're very young, when getting back into that brain thing again, we're in theta brainwaves and we're sponging everything in, and the people that tell us those stories are by and large people we trust.
Indeed.
So that whole genre of storytelling immediately puts you in my subconscious level of trust.
Yeah, as an expert.
Exactly. And we buy from people we know, like, and trust.
Indeed.
Trailers, you talk about your book, as you've just done. And that's the whole point, isn't it? You're drawing people in to your world so that you can share more of what you do. Now, your book is not the only thing there, is it? Because you've got a course that goes in tandem with it. Tell us a bit more about it.
I do. So the book is 12 chapters, and we go through everything from niching to messaging and then continue on. And then the last chapter is all about balance and making sure that as coaches, we are looking after ourselves. And what I've found is that coaches quite often, they like to consume, but they don't always implement quite as well as they could. I mean, how many of us have courses on our desktops, on our phones, on our devices that have never been finished? Now, we might tell ourselves that we got what we needed, but in reality, did we just find another shiny object and ran off and did that? So the course is to help step the coaches through it. So we basically followed the same pattern as the book. And it's 10, not 12, so that just shortens it up a little bit. And it's a case of we have an hour of learning and then an hour of recapping our implementing from the previous one. So we're being held accountable and we're making sure that we're actually implementing the things that we are learning so that we can move ahead. Because knowledge by itself is not going to get us where we need to go.
Indeed. I mean, you were saying about the bright, shiny object syndrome, that some of us have been conditioned to learn, perpetual student, and you think, and I've heard that somewhere before, but I've actually done anything with it.
Exactly.
No. Yeah. So that accountability piece is really important, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And sometimes it's a case of getting out of your own way as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as coaches, we know that. We know that we need to be doing that mind work and making sure that we're not having those blocks. Oh, I don't want to get on video. I don't want to get my message out there. I don't want to get on stage. I don't want to read my book. All of that kind of thing. Is that a mind block? Is that something we need to work on? And by having not only the accountability, but the access to actually being coached means that we can start to deal with those things and not have that spinning perpetual wheel of the hamster going round and round and round, and then finding 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the track, we still haven't got that business going because of just that one thing that we couldn't quite get past.
Well, so much wisdom coming out of your mouth right now, Cathy. Thank you so much for sharing. So
you're very welcome.
When because you've got your book, you've got your program, you've got your coaching experience, as well as your chapter leading in a networking group. Can you share with the audience, please, how you embody your written stuff? Because we've already said writing covers a multifarious different genres.
Yeah.
And so you've been writing for a long time. How do you, when you're speaking, how do you take that essence of the state of the page and take it to stage? Is there something that you can share with us?
So stories. Getting the audience involved in stories. So thinking about, particularly if I'm talking about the book, just one chapter, not trying to give them all 12 in the 5, 10, 15-minute time slot you've got, or even if it's an hour, because it just gets too overwhelming. And when we get confused, we lose. So if we're trying to tell people too many things, then we just go, yeah. Oh, that sounds good. Oh, and suddenly we're asleep. Yeah. Because we just can't cognitively process it all in that time. So bringing in a story and getting the audience involved as well, particularly if you're in a relatively small group, anything up to about 100 people, you might know a few people in that audience, or you might have a few people that you can sort of draw in a little bit. And using people's names. If you know the audience and you know the people, then try to bring in an example that might bring them into it in a positive way, obviously. If it's a negative, then you might just want to call them Joe Blow. But if you can bring in a positive and bring the audience into your story, be part of your story, be part of the experience, then that can really make a huge difference.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. There's a wonderful quote by Les Brown who said, "Never tell a story without making a point. And never make a point without using a story." Yeah, that's a good one, because sometimes when we get so involved in our story, we forget it's the audience who wants to know the point of it.
Yes.
So yeah, that's really good. So we've got a brilliant story which is leading us to the main point.
Exactly. And especially if that main point is your business and you are trying to sell them coaching, for instance. So you might be trying to sell them one-on-one sessions or a group session. Then if you don't come to the point, then there's no reason for them to buy. It was a lovely afternoon. We got some great information and off we go. And that's the end. And particularly if you're doing a lot of speaking that's not paid, then you need to be getting that return on your investment. So how can you do that? Can you sell your book? Can you invite them into doing some one-on-one coaching or some group sessions, or it could be an evergreen course, something like that? How are you going to actually monetize your work? Because yes, it's great to give back and it's great to do things for free, but if you're not feeding your family, then it's going to be a very expensive hobby that you're going to have to be able to get that money and feed your family another way, which means that you're potentially going to have to go back to that corporate gig that you've tried so hard to get out of, or go and do something else that you didn't want to do. When sometimes it's just a case of literally saying to somebody, hey, I've got this course. Would you like to buy it?
Yes. And doing it in that gentle conversational style, not the, I've got this course. Would you like to buy it? I mean, because even when we're marketing, we're talking about our stuff and we're really passionate about it. And then there's a perceptible shift in energy. And here comes the sale.
Yeah. But it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't have to be a sale. It can be an opportunity to buy. So quite often it's just about the languaging and the way that you're thinking about it. So rather than thinking, I've got this course and I've got to sell it, well, I've got these couple of opportunities that you might like to have. Great. If you do, fantastic. This is how you do it. If you don't, well, I just had a really nice conversation with you. It was great to have an hour chatting.
Exactly. It's that intention, it's that frame, it's that energy, because the energy that we're bringing to the conversation, whether we like it or not, is what will be picked up by the other person.
Indeed.
And if there's that sense of desperation, they're going to go, no.
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Exactly, not a
and
chance.
If you can narrow it down to what your people's problem is, what is it that your solution is? So it's literally like going to the doctor. You go to the doctor and you've got a sore arm and they say, okay, you need to go off and have some x-rays. Now we need to put a cast on it. And now there's a prescription. You don't quite often go, okay, well, I'm not having the cast and I'm not having the prescription and I'm going to go to 15 doctors before I get my broken arm fixed. You just go, well, they're the expert. They know what they're doing. They've done their study. I just go ahead and do what they're suggesting I do. Yeah. And that's where it is. It's a case of, okay, you've got this problem. I've got these two different things that could be the solution for you. Would you like A or B?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Cathy. You've shared with us that your speaking and your writing have come pretty much in tandem, that you've always been at this. You've been a born communicator and you've also worked at it. It's not pure innate ability. There's that both and situation. And so we're now looking at a new author, a recent author, because it's not your first book, but a recent author.
It is my first book.
It is your first book?
It's actually my first book. So, yes.
Oh, congratulations.
Many things, but never into a book form, and certainly never a book form that I am the author. So, yeah, it is my first book.
Fantastic. Did you take a video of you as you opened the box?
I did, indeed.
Good. Because it's such a thrilling experience, and it doesn't matter how many times you've done it. Every time I'm working with authors, I say, when you get the physical version, literally holding onto your book feels so good.
Yes.
So good. Congratulations. New book. We will make sure that everybody has on the show notes a link as to how to get hold of it. Is it available on Amazon or is it available purely for your website?
It's only available on my website at this stage. So that is Cathy Smith with a C.com.au. And the physical book is available there. The Kindle is still being finalised, and then it will go to Amazon. So at this point, just cathysmith.com.au.
Okay, that will definitely go in the show notes, as we will also add in the link to your podcast.
Thank you.
How often do your podcast go out?
Once a week. Every Thursday. And we have 237 episodes. So,
go you. What percentage does that put you in? Because there are percentages marked on how many episodes, aren't there?
Yeah, there is. And yes, very high up there, because the first challenge is to, one, publish in the beginning. The second challenge is to get more than 7 episodes. Right. And then it goes up from there. So it's just like business. There's lots of people start them, but very few people continue on.
Yeah. Patience and persistence, 2 of my favorite P's.
I'm not very good at the patience one.
Yeah, no, neither am I. But it's a perpetual lesson. There's another one. Okay. Perpetual patience and persistence. Cathy, have I missed anything else that you want to share with us?
No, I think just the niching is really important, and people get really scared about it. That they're really worried that if they niche down, that they're going to exclude people. And in actual fact, it's the opposite, as per the cordial story. If you're trying to talk to everybody, there's no way that you can be the expert. And it's so much easier to get podcast guest interviews, to get onto different people's mediums, which is a great way to get exposure if you're the expert in one thing. So even with life coaching, if you're a general life coach, who do I send to you? Who would I recommend to you?
Yeah.
But if you're a marketing coach, a business coach for new coaches who want to market themselves, then that becomes a much tighter area, and you can go, yeah, I know that person, or no, I don't.
Yes.
So if you're thinking about like a sales course, if it's a sales course for everybody, oh yeah, that's of interest. But if it's a sales course for only people that identify as females, okay, now we're getting tighter. If it's a sales course for only people who identify as females in Melbourne, Australia, then you're immediately going, well, I don't fit into that. That's not for me. So what if it's a sales course for people that identify as females, Melbourne, Australia, that work in the CBD? Does that sound like you if you are in that demographics? If you work in the CBD, you're now thinking, they've got to know me. That's going to be so good. Most times you'll pay more for it. And in actual fact, it was probably the same material as the first sales course. But now it sounds like it's made specifically for you. And as buyers, we go out and we look for that. We look for that really tight, that they know me. We look for the designer dress that there's only a couple of, not hundreds of, etc., etc. But when we're selling, we reverse it. Yes, they must know me. They're only doing it for me. I'm their case study. I must be amazing. But as salespeople, and when we're selling our products, we reverse it. And then we wonder why it's so hard to sell.
One rule for me, one rule for the other person? No, we're all the same.
Yep.
Exactly. Cathy, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And thank you for sharing your From Page to Stage. From us.
You are very welcome.
Bye for now.
Thank you for having me. Bye, Wendy.